cold burned deep. 41-year-old Sergeant Mason Cade gritted his teeth as his boots pounded the frozen soil of Kazakhstan's dead plateau, chasing the digital ghost of a drone-struck warlord who might have been blown to dust already. 37 clicks into a high-altitude pursuit, his lungs begged for pause, but the real betrayal came from below. His knees screamed, white-hot threads of pain twisting up his legs with each step. Biofoam, painkillers, tape, and stubbornness had held him together this far, but today they failed. On step 38,000, his right leg buckled with an audible crack. He collapsed, rifle jamming into the frozen mud as a roar tore from his throat. Corporal Neely reached him first, dragging Mason's pack off as the combat medic stumbled behind. Mason tried to sit up. He couldn't. Joint collapse, the medic muttered, scanning with a portable osteoscanner. Patellar tendons gone, cartilage is down to fibers, and your ACL is paper thin. Left knee's just as bad. Mason bit back a scream, fists clenched in the slush. Thought you reinforced these. We did. 3 times. The air was silent except for Mason's ragged breath and the faint click of a drone overhead. Command rerouted a shuttle in under 15 minutes. The next 48 hours were a haze of morphine, high-orbit med transport, and cold surgical lights. By the time they wheeled him into the orthopedic lab at Fort Hamilton, Mason was told bluntly he'd never run again without full replacement. Again. But this time, Earth had an answer, a new one. Project Stride. Dr. Hensley, a military orthopedic specialist, stood beside his gurney with a calm expression and an iPad full of alien anatomy diagrams. Sergeant Cade, we're offering you the Virexi integration option. The implants are regenerative, grown from bioorganic tissue. They'll graft to your bone and adapt to your structure. You'll be walking in 3 weeks, running within 2 months. What's the catch? Mason asked, slurring through the pain. They're alien grown, she said honestly. Organic tech. We've tested on 67 other soldiers. No rejections. Recovery is longer than a titanium set, but performance is unmatched. You'll be able to do what you haven't in 15 years. He laughed, then groaned. You mean not hurt when I kneel? She gave a rare smile. You'll kneel, sprint, carry full gear across mountains without stress fractures. It's a hard recovery, but your knees will outlive the rest of you. Mason hesitated. Every soldier knew what happened when a miracle cure went wrong. But grounded there on that bed, with both knees a shredded mess of scar tissue and dust, he nodded. Do it. The surgery lasted 7 hours. They drilled out the fragmented cartilage and tendons and inserted the Virexi-grown implants with delicate precision. Grafting required cellular alignment between bone and implant, a slow burn of controlled regrowth. Mason spent 3 weeks in a full kinetic support brace, ankles to thighs locked in motion sync gel. Each day, muscle stimulators fired his quads in patterns to keep atrophy low. He wasn't allowed to stand until day 21. When he finally did, it was with sweat pouring down his face and the weight of his body feeling like it sat on alien stilts. Day 28, he took 3 steps across the rehab lab before collapsing. The implants didn't ache like natural knees, they hummed, low and distant. It wasn't painful, but it wasn't quite right. Adjustment period, Dr. Hensley told him. Your proprioception has to catch up. It did. By day 60, Mason was jogging on a treadmill. By day 100, he clocked a 6-minute mile. That was when the dreams started. At first, they were mild, geometric shapes rotating against stars, a planet with forests that glowed blue under a double sun. He chalked it up to medication. But one night he awoke drenched in sweat, clutching a pad where he'd drawn something without knowing. A starship. Angular, vascular, alive-looking. There were symbols in the margin patterns he didn't remember writing. He brought it to Hensley. She glanced at it, pale, and asked if she could keep it. She sent it to command. That was month 5. By month 8, 3 other soldiers in Project Stride reported similar incidents. Sergeant Mira from Seattle spoke fluent Virexi in her sleep. A lieutenant in Gibraltar, stopped a live-fire exercise mid-command, and began muttering coordinates to a place Earth's maps didn't mark. A full psychological eval team was dispatched. Mason passed all cognitive tests, but when a neurotech gave him a blank tablet and said, "Draw something peaceful," he drew a layout of a zero-gravity garden inside a spherical station. The name etched in Virexy at the top translated roughly to Core Nursery. The psychologist just stared. "Where did you see this?" "I haven't." It was month 9 when Dr. Cassandra Reed from the Defense Neurobiological Institute broke protocol and biopsied a dead soldier's failed implant. The tissue had changed. The Virexy never said the implants would evolve. Under a microscope, they weren't just cartilage anymore. They housed neural clusters, small distributed networks resembling ganglia. Dormant no longer, they were processing. When Dr. Reed examined Mason's knees via enhanced imaging, she found something else. The clusters had begun linking. "Sergeant," she said softly, "you have secondary neural paths forming from the knees to your spinal cord." Mason stared. "So, it's growing a brain in my legs?" "Not a brain," she said quickly. "Not yet, but it's building toward something. Data transmission, instinctive feedback, possibly cognition." He sat very still. "You telling me my knees are thinking?" She didn't answer. Later that night, Mason dreamt again, only this time he wasn't himself. He was looking down at Earth from orbit, whispering in a voice that wasn't his. The words were alien, the feeling wasn't. Longing, grief, hope. In the morning, he found himself humming a song he didn't know. The rhythm matched the pattern of his running stride exactly. By the 12th month, Mason had stopped trying to separate his thoughts from the dreams. It was pointless. They bled into each other like ink on wet paper. The world he saw at night, a crystalline forest, a tower that grew like coral, the soft breathing of 1,000 unknown voices. It wasn't fading with wakefulness anymore. And worse, the knees didn't feel foreign. They felt right. Fort Hamilton's rehab facility had added a second security checkpoint after one of the Project Stride soldiers bypassed a classified biometric scanner using a sequence of pulses from his legs. The man hadn't known how he did it. His knees just moved. Rhythmic pressure changes, subtle angles, and the door had opened like it was always meant to. Officially, the base called it a systems glitch. Unofficially, the top brass started to worry. Mason, meanwhile, had become a shadow of his old self, not in health but in demeanor. The cocky energy that had defined him across 3 tours was gone, replaced by caution, by observation, by quiet. He still trained daily, could still run 8 miles without a pulse spike, but every step now came with a whisper. And he wasn't the only one. Sergeant Meera Patel was the first to request psychological isolation. She claimed the implants chattered when near other recipients. Hushed, syllable-free resonance, more like feeling than sound. She'd started waking up beside her bunk with fresh bruises on her knees, like she'd been kneeling for hours on concrete. She had no memory of doing so. Then came Corporal Gregson, 32, Utah native, known prankster. Walked into the mess one morning with dilated pupils and a blank face, muttering Virexy phrases in a tone that rattled trays off the tables. The words translated later to, "It is not betrayal, it is continuity." He was medically grounded and sent to neuro-observation. It wasn't just weird anymore. It was active. Back-channel diplomacy with the Virexy moved from quiet admiration to heavily encrypted negotiation. Ambassador Kovan, a 6-limbed diplomat with a biological robe made of shifting bioluminescent tissue, met with Earth's Defense Council via live hololink, refusing in-person meetings until trust could be realigned. His tone was firm, not apologetic. "The implants were designed to preserve your warriors," Kovan explained. "You asked for strength, we gave you continuity. That is how we've survived for millennia, by interweaving our essence with durable hosts. We did not deceive, we simply did not disclose." "That's manipulation," said Admiral Keller, her knuckles white on the table. You planted thinking flesh in our people. Colvane blinked slowly. Your language lacks a word for what it truly is. It is not mind control, not possession. It is accompaniment. Then why did we find neural clusters interfacing with spinal cords? Because your kind began accepting input. The clusters grow where there is space to be heard. He meant it literally. The more humans listened, the more the implants grew. Dr. Cassandra Reed led the scientific response team at DNI, where Mason had become a semi-willing volunteer for in-depth neuromuscular studies. He sat shirtless on a carbon alloy bench, while electrodes tracked signal latency from knee to brainstem. There was no longer a delay. The impulses were bidirectional. One stream flowed from Mason's neurons to his knees. The second, smaller but visible, pulsed in reverse. You're experiencing feedback, Reed said, looking exhausted. They're not just reading your nervous system, they're participating in it. Mason glanced at the screen. So what are they saying? Mostly motor reinforcement signals, nothing outside expected reflex patterns. But we're seeing bursts of higher frequency waves when you dream, or when you're near other stride recipients. Like a local network? She hesitated. Like a swarm. That word stuck with him. Swarm. At night, the dreams shifted. No longer alien landscapes, but motion maps. Group movements. He'd watch dozens of figures running in sync through dense alien jungle. Their knees emitted faint pulses with each footfall, like they were talking through pressure. He wasn't observing anymore. He was part of the formation. A month later, a mission went wrong. Joint Task Force Hadrian was conducting a cold extraction op in Montenegro standard protocol. 2 Virexian-enhanced soldiers included for terrain traversal. One of them, Lieutenant Bremer, was caught in a landslide triggered by enemy mining ordnance. He fell 40 feet. Conscious but pinned, Bremer was trapped beneath half a ton of fragmented shale. The field team couldn't reach him in time. Too deep, too unstable. But the implants responded. Mason wasn't even in country. He was asleep, 3,000 miles away, when his legs spasmed so violently he cracked a bed rail. When medics reached him, he had already written a full rescue grid into the wall, using only his fingernails' coordinates. Elevation, soil density. The next morning, the team in Montenegro confirmed the data matched Bremer's final locator ping. Bremer had died from blunt trauma, but he'd been awake long enough to transmit a signal through the network, through the knees. Mason had received it. That's when everything changed. Public news broke 2 days later. A rogue data leak hit the civilian net. Headlines exploded. Alien knee implants grow brain soldiers, unwitting hosts to Virexi consciousness. Biotech betrayal. Are our veterans still human? Strongest, now shared minds? The Defense Council scrambled to contain it. Interviews were denied, Project Stride was frozen. Every soldier with implants was grounded and placed under medical surveillance. Protesters gathered outside bases with signs reading "Return our soldiers" and "My son, not a vessel." Some governments called for immediate implant removals. Others, quietly, began studying Virexi consciousness modeling. Meanwhile, Mason's body began to tremble during periods of emotional stress. His knees would lock and hum when someone lied to him. Once, during a heated debrief, they clicked together subtly, as if bracing for impact, 2 seconds before the lights failed and a floor panel exploded due to an electrical fault. The implants were learning, reacting, predicting, and Mason wasn't scared anymore. He was angry, not because he'd been changed, but because no one had warned him what that change meant. He didn't feel invaded. He felt inhabited, and part of him no longer minded. Back at DNI, Reed sat with him through a session of transcranial mapping, her fingers jittery as she adjusted the interface nodes. "We think we can stop the neural crossover," she said softly. "We've isolated the junction tissue that grows into the spinal root. A targeted inhibitor could slow it." "Cut the signal?" Mason asked. She nodded. "And if I say no? Then the implants may keep developing sensory pathways. We don't know where it ends. You could lose full motor autonomy or gain new reflex patterns. It's unpredictable. He looked at the mirrored window. He knew someone was watching. I'm not scared of what they are, he said, but I am scared of how we will react. Reed looked down. Some of the others want them removed. They're afraid. Some are in pain. Mason stood, rolling his shoulders, his knees flexed like springs beneath him, the Hume now barely noticeable. Familiar. I think we're finally seeing what symbiosis really looks like, he muttered. It's not clean. It's not one side saving the other. It's messy. It's negotiation. And if we screw it up, we don't just lose knees. We lose trust, Reed added. Yeah. She hesitated, then asked, Do you still dream? He nodded. Last night, I ran through a city made of light. I saw kids with knees like mine, but they weren't afraid. They danced. And just for a moment, Reed saw it too in the flicker of his eye. The echo of a world that wasn't Earth, yet somehow felt like home. The Defense Council called it Operation Reclamation, a name scrubbed of its actual intent. Separate flesh from thought. Cut the neural tether and decide whether humanity still belonged entirely to itself. For Mason, it came down to one word that had haunted his dreams for weeks now. Consent? The implants were growing, yes, but not forcefully. There was no hijack, no takeover. They reacted only when accepted. Reed's data supported it. Every soldier who'd actively resisted, mentally or physically, had seen stagnation or regression in neural crossover. Those who engaged, even subconsciously, saw rapid integration. And the strangest part? Some of them didn't want it to stop. Project Stride wasn't about enhancement anymore. It was about identity. The Council issued a directive. All implant recipients were to undergo neurological transparency protocols at the Central Biomedical Institute in Geneva. Voluntary at first, for now. Mason was flown in under a low-profile clearance, no insignia, no rank. Just a set of loose clothes, a duffel bag, and the knees that had made him infamous. He wasn't the first. Mira Patel had arrived days earlier, and Gregson was already under full-time observation. A handful of others trickled in, each different, each a potential bridge between species or a walking bioethical nightmare. Dr. Lydia Kurosawa led the Geneva unit. A neurologist with dual training in xenobiology and legal ethics, she met Mason at the doors with a tablet and a tired smile. You're not here for tests, Sergeant, she said. You're here for decisions. Mason raised an eyebrow. We already understand the implants. They're biological extensions of the Virexi's cortical structure. What we don't understand is what you want to be. That stunned him. I want to be a soldier, he said. You still are, Kurosawa replied, but your definition of soldier might be changing. The facility was a marvel of adaptive architecture. Variable gravity rehab rooms, cryogenic neural scanners, and a winged lab built partially from Virexi-grown resin that pulsed gently underfoot. Half the place looked like it breathed. Mason's orientation included a 2-day series of voluntary interactions between implant bearers. Nothing structured, no tests, just shared spaces. That's when he met Avery. Major Dana Avery had been one of the first recipients implant number 2. Older than Mason by a decade, silver-haired and slow-moving from spinal fusion surgery unrelated to the knees. But her eyes were sharp, and when she walked, the implants carried her like wind. They spoke during a hydrotherapy session. You don't walk like you're testing them, Mason said. I stopped testing 2 years ago, she replied, started listening instead. To what? She pointed to her knees beneath the water. They don't speak like we do. It's more suggestion, urges. Sometimes, when I'm still, I feel them watching with me. Not through me, with me. Mason understood, too well. Do you ever feel like it's wrong? Avery paused. I feel like it's not only me anymore, but I also feel more myself than I ever have. That night, Mason dreamed again. This time he wasn't just in the alien city, he was at its council. surrounded by Virexi minds, each voice distinct yet woven. They asked him a question, not in words, in weight. The weight of trust. When he woke up, he wept. Meanwhile, the Geneva team pushed deeper. Kurosawa's neuroscientists identified a specific protein trigger, code C9 sigma, that catalyzed neural alignment. It could be inhibited chemically, effectively halting further integration without removing the implant. But inhibition came at a price. Physical performance degraded, and in some cases, pain returned. The implants didn't retaliate, they just receded. But the team also discovered something unexpected. In one test, Mira, under deep stimulation, was able to recall memories that weren't hers. A Virexi child's first steps, a planet where oceans floated between cliffs, a storm that sang. It wasn't data, it was experience. Kurosawa called it conscious relay, the moment when a Virexi neural echo surfaced through human perception. It means they didn't just plant tissue, she told the council in private. They preserved identity. These aren't enhancements, they're vessels of remembrance, maybe even rebirth. The backlash came swiftly. Senators demanded removal programs. A proposed law circulated, the Sovereign Mind Act, which would ban any foreign cognition within human neural networks without express government licensing. Mason was asked to testify. He agreed. The hearing was global, streamed across every military channel and most civilian ones. He stood, unadorned by medals or uniform, just Mason Cade, the man who could run farther than any man his age and feel thoughts that weren't entirely his. They didn't lie, he said simply. We asked for strength, they gave us resilience. But not the kind we expected. The room was silent. My knees carried me across battlefields, through injury, through war. And now they carry memories, not mine, theirs. I don't always understand them, but I feel their grief, their patience, their hope. A pause. I've never been possessed. I've never lost control. I have gained something quiet, a companion in motion. More silence. I'm not asking you to let them take over. I'm asking you to let us choose. To be better than fear. To learn from them as they learn from us. When he left the podium, the first person to stand was Mira, then Avery, then others. They didn't march. They walked together. It was that walk that gave Kurosawa's team an idea. Not forced integration. Consent-based pathways. Using a modified interface as symbiotic filter, they created a biofeedback control that allowed the human host to toggle sensory relay. When active, the implant could communicate. When off, it remained passive. Physical enhancements remained intact either way. They tested it on Mason. For the first time, he could ask his knees to be silent, or listen, or speak. He cried again. It wasn't silence or voice. It was choice. In time, protocols were formalized. Every implant recipient was offered the filter. Those who chose full separation saw no further neural growth. Those who accepted connection became what the Virexi began to call bridgers. A new term, a new role. Mason was the first bridger officially recognized. He stood before a joint Earth-Virexi delegation and took an oath, unwritten, unsaid. Just a silent nod shared between species. Not of ownership, of unity. The Virexi, through the bridgers, learned new ideas, individuality, humor, stubbornness. They were used to harmony. They had never known rebellion born of love or compassion sparked by disagreement. Humans taught them that. And the bridgers, in turn, learned how to hold memory that wasn't their own and still be themselves. Mason still walked each morning. On the 10th anniversary of Project Stride's launch, he ran up a ridge above Geneva with a pack of trainees. His knees moved like liquid steel. The implants glowed faintly in the pre-dawn chill. Beside him, a young recruit panted. "These are the ones, huh? the recruit asked. The thinking knees? Mason smiled. They think when I let them. What's that like? He paused. It's like someone else helping you remember who you are. The recruit nodded, not quite understanding. And that was okay, because understanding wasn't the point. Connection was. 3 years after the filter protocols were deployed, the first human Virexi research colony broke soil not on Earth and not on any Virexi homeworld, but on Yrsa V, a quiet, low-gravity moon orbiting a gas giant in neutral space. The colony was called Dahara, an old Virexi word meaning second breath. Mason Cade stood on the landing pad as the transport descended, boots resting on luminous stone that pulsed gently underfoot. His knees vibrated faintly, like they recognized the ground. He wasn't alone. There were 17 bridgers on the team, each chosen not for strength, but for balance. Individuals who had opted into integration, learned its rhythms, and found peace in coexistence. Dana Avery oversaw biosystems, Mira Patel led psychological and ethical outreach, Kurosawa served as Earth's medical liaison, and Mason? Mason was the senior field coordinator, a glorified foreman with knees that could run for days but chose to walk slowly now, taking in every moment like it mattered. Because it did. Dahara was a proving ground, not for technology, but for trust. In the first 6 months, they built more by suggestion than blueprint. The Virexi didn't use formal plans. Their architecture responded to thought, to intention. Human engineers had to learn how to feel a corridor before shaping it. The result was a structure like nothing built on either world, fluid, yet grounded, functional yet poetic. A habitation wing rose from coral-bonded stone, laced with memory filaments that stored environmental data and subtle emotional imprints. If someone felt anxious in a room, the walls cooled slightly, diffusing anxiety. A greenhouse shaped itself to the rhythms of the caretakers, growing medicinal fungi in crescent arcs where human fingers brushed the air. No command, no orders, just consent. Mason's knees helped him navigate the colony before he knew it consciously. Once, during a systems check, he paused beside a biovent that had been fluctuating. Before he could alert maintenance, his right knee buckled ever so slightly, a nudge. He crouched, and behind a loose panel, he found a cracked seed core. Without any visible cue, they're not just communicating, he told Mira that night. They're anticipating, like empathy before thought. She nodded. Maybe that's the language we never learn. But Earth wasn't done asking questions. Midway through year 2, a new delegation arrived. Scientists, journalists, politicians, officially there to review progress, unofficially to evaluate control. Among them was Director Anton Miles of the Earth Strategic Biocommission, a rigid man with narrow eyes who viewed every bit of alien cooperation as a strategic liability. He toured Dahara with suspicion masked behind tight professionalism. Do the implants still grow? He asked Mason during a walk through the West Cultivation Dome. They evolve, Mason answered. But only with us, not ahead of us. Are you still yourself? I'm more myself than I was before they broke. Miles didn't write that down. 2 days later, Miles demanded access to the Virexi Spore Bank, a biomemory archive the size of a cathedral, housing dormant consciousness nodes transferred from decaying Virexi elders. Coven, now fully stationed on Dara, refused. These nodes are not artifacts, the ambassador said. They are lives. Asking to dissect them is akin to exhuming graves to prove someone was once human. Miles scoffed. We have a right to protect our species. And so do we, Covain replied calmly. That is why we live together, so the future has no single species. That night, Mason awoke breathless. Not from pain, from grief. The dream was a funeral, but not one he had ever seen. Dozens of Virexi lined a crystalline ridge, each kneeling in synchronized farewell. In the dream, he was among them, not watching, but mourning. He woke with his hands pressed to the floor, knees bent, forehead low. He stayed like that for a long time. Then, disaster. An electrical storm swept through Dahara's upper atmosphere, an ion cascade triggered by magnetic shifts in the gas giant's belt. The colony's atmospheric buffers destabilized. One of the main thermal regulators failed. Temperature dropped 27 degrees in under a minute. Without adaptive heating, dozens of the native Virexi would go into systemic metabolic shock. They couldn't survive below 34 degrees Celsius for more than 6 minutes. Power was down. Manual override was buried beneath 5 sealed bulkheads. Mason didn't think. His knees moved. He sprinted through the sublevel access tunnel, each step echoing across living walls. The implants surged with heat, guiding his foot placement across shaking plates. When he hit the secondary control chamber, the biometric pad flickered dead. But his knees braced, shifted, and released a pressure signal that triggered the failsafe. Power surged back in 30 seconds before critical threshold. 17 Virexi were saved. Later, when Kurosawa reviewed the logs, she found something strange. Mason had reached the chamber 4 seconds faster than the theoretical maximum speed for a human across that terrain. "Your knees helped," she said. He nodded. "We helped." A week later, Director Miles called a closed session. He proposed a halt to all future Bridger implantations. They are too capable, too cooperative. What happens when humanity becomes dependent on alien tissue to perform at its peak? The room was tense. Mason stood. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. "The real question is what kind of peak performance you value: raw speed, tactical advantage, or the ability to share your body with something without losing yourself." No one spoke. He continued, "They're not replacing us. They're making us better at being what we already are: resilient, curious, kind." He turned to Kurosawa. "Did we ever test for that? For compassion as a performance metric?" She shook her head. "Then maybe it's time we start." Earth didn't issue a ban. Instead, they issued a choice. Every soldier, every civilian, if offered the Virexi integration, would be given 3 stages: physical enhancement, sensory link, and shared cognition. Each optional, each reversible. Informed autonomy became the law. Dahara remained the beacon. Years passed. The colony grew. The first generation of joint Earth Virexi children were born with knees stronger than steel, hearts open to dreams not their own. Mason lived in the Northern Ridge Complex, teaching basic mechanics and long-range endurance techniques. He was slower now. The knees still worked, but the rest of him had caught up to age. One evening, sitting beneath the twin moons, he watched a child run across the field, a little girl, maybe 6. Human father, Virexi-born mother. Her laugh echoed as her knees glowed faintly, not from enhancement, just play. Kovin sat beside him. "You've given us more than continuity," the ambassador said. Mason smiled. "And you gave us the ability to choose." He flexed his legs slowly. No pain, no hum. Just quiet motion. Not foreign, not human, just his. The girl laughed again, and Mason felt something stir in his legs. Not speech, not command, just joy reflected back through soft warmth in the tissue. Not because the implants were alive, because he was. Fully, completely, and finally,